June 4th, 1942, 10:20 hours, 14,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. Lieutenant Commander Wade McClusky's fuel gauge read 25 gallons remaining as he banked his SBD Dauntless dive bomber in a wide circle, watching something below that made no sense according to everything he understood about Japanese tactical doctrine and naval defensive superiority. 3 Japanese aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, sat exposed on the ocean surface with their flight decks crowded with aircraft being fueled and armed in the open. No combat air patrol circled above them at high altitude. No defensive screen protected them. They appeared completely vulnerable despite being the most powerful carrier striking force ever assembled. The same carriers that had devastated Pearl Harbor 6 months earlier, that had sunk Prince of Wales and Repulse off Malaya, that had terrorized the Indian Ocean with impunity, destroying everything they encountered. McClusky's cockpit was an oven at 14,000 feet. Sweat soaked through his flight suit. His hands trembled slightly on the stick, not from fear, but from 2 hours of high-altitude flying in unpressurized cockpit, where oxygen was thin and every breath required conscious effort. Behind him, 37 dive bombers remained from the 67 that had launched from Enterprise that morning. The rest had turned back when fuel ran low, following doctrine that said you don't search beyond the point where you can return safely. McClusky had violated that doctrine. He'd kept searching when his fuel gauge told him to turn back. He'd gambled that Japanese carriers were somewhere ahead and that finding them was worth the risk of ditching in the ocean when fuel ran out. He'd bet his life and the lives of 37 pilots following him on a hunch that the enemy was close enough to reach before fuel exhausted completely. And there they were, 3 carriers, completely exposed, apparently undefended. Think about that moment. The entire trajectory of the Pacific War balanced on Wade McClusky's fuel gauge, showing 25 gallons, enough for perhaps 15 more minutes of flight, and 3 Japanese carriers sitting vulnerable 14,000 feet below, with their decks crowded with aircraft, fuel lines, ordnance, and men who had no idea that American dive bombers were positioned perfectly above them at the exact altitude where Japanese combat air patrol should have been, but wasn't. What McClusky didn't know as his right hand moved toward the radio switch to signal attack was that he had arrived at the one moment in the entire 4-day battle when Japanese carriers were maximally vulnerable, caught between defensive posture and offensive preparation, with dozens of aircraft on deck being fueled and armed rather than safely stowed below or flying protective patrol overhead, with torpedo and bomb handlers stacking ordnance in the open because repeated rearming orders had left no time for proper safety protocols. What McClusky didn't know was that 30 minutes earlier, 3 squadrons of obsolete American torpedo bombers, TBD devastators flying at wave-top altitude, had attacked these same carriers in 3 separate waves and been slaughtered completely. That 41 torpedo bombers had attacked. That 35 had been shot down, that not a single torpedo had hit. The Japanese Zero fighters and anti-aircraft gunners had massacred the torpedo squadrons so completely that Japanese commanders believed they'd broken American aerial attack capability. What McClusky didn't know was that those torpedo squadrons' sacrifice, futile from tactical perspective, achieving 0 hits while losing 35 aircraft and most of their crews, had inadvertently created the conditions that now made his attack possible. That Japanese combat air patrol had been pulled down to wave-top level, chasing the last surviving torpedo bombers. That Japanese fighter controllers had committed every available 0 to slaughtering the low-altitude threat. That high altitude, where dive bombers attacked from, had been left completely undefended because all Japanese attention was focused on killing the last torpedo bombers struggling away at sea level. What McClusky didn't know was that below on carrier Akagi's bridge, Admiral Takashi Nakamura had just completed his second rearming order of the morning. That Japanese aircraft had been loaded with torpedoes for attacking ships, then switched to bombs for attacking Midway Island, then switched back to torpedoes when American carriers were finally spotted. That this rearming chaos had created exactly the conditions McClusky was observing: flight decks crowded with aircraft, fuel lines running everywhere, ordnance stacked in the open, ammunition handlers working frantically to complete rearming before American carriers could attack. What McClusky didn't know was that in exactly 5 minutes, just 5 minutes from this moment, 3 of the 4 carriers that attacked Pearl Harbor would be burning wrecks that would sink before sunset. That the attack he was about to lead would destroy Japan's offensive carrier capability so completely that Japanese naval aviation would never recover. That these 5 minutes would be remembered as the most decisive 5 minutes in naval warfare history, the hinge point where Japanese dominance transformed into Japanese defeat in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. What McClusky didn't know was that his decision to continue searching beyond safe fuel return, a decision that violated every doctrine about fuel management, and that many of his pilots had questioned silently as their own fuel gauges dropped into red zones, was the gamble upon which the entire Pacific War's outcome would turn. That, arriving 5 minutes earlier, would have found Japanese carriers in different configuration, possibly less vulnerable. That, arriving 5 minutes later, would have found Japanese fighters recovered to high altitude, ready to intercept. That the window of vulnerability he was observing would close within minutes whether he attacked or not. What McClusky didn't know was that simultaneously, at this exact moment, Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie's squadron of dive bombers from carrier Yorktown was approaching the same Japanese carriers from a different direction, having arrived independently through different navigation that happened to converge at identical moment. That neither squadron commander knew the other was present. That the coordination which would appear to Japanese observers as perfect American tactical planning was actually accidental convergence that couldn't have been choreographed better if both squadron commanders had rehearsed for months. What McClusky didn't know was that 40 years later, in 1982, he would meet Lieutenant Takashi Nakamura, who at this moment was standing on Akagi's flight deck supervising the rearming of torpedo bombers, and learn that Japanese personnel on those carriers never saw the dive bombers until bombs were already falling. That Nakamura would describe watching his carrier explode around him, seeing friends die in fires started by American bombs hitting fuel and ordnance stacked on deck. That Nakamura would tell him Japanese commanders initially refused to believe the attack timing was accidental because it was so perfectly executed that it had to be deliberate coordination. What McClusky didn't know was that floating in the ocean 12 miles away, Ensign George Gay, sole survivor of Torpedo Squadron 8, was treading water under his raft, watching this entire drama unfold. That Gay had watched his entire squadron of 15 aircraft get shot down during their attack 30 minutes earlier. That Gay was watching through a hole in his raft as McClusky's dive bombers began their attack. That Gay would provide the only American eyewitness account of the entire battle from unique perspective of someone floating in the middle of the combat zone, watching both the American attack and Japanese response simultaneously. The mathematics of naval warfare were being written in the space between McClusky's fuel gauge reading 25 gallons, 3 exposed Japanese carriers with their decks crowded with ordnance, and 5 minutes of time that would determine whether Japan or America dominated the Pacific for the remainder of the war. And those mathematics were proving something that would reshape military history, that intelligence can create opportunities, courage can position forces to exploit them, but ultimate victory requires the kind of fortune that makes everything converge at exactly the right moment in exactly the right way.
By the time McClusky's right hand reached the radio switch at 10:22 hours, and his voice crackled through 37 headsets saying, "Attack, attack, attack," the outcome of the Pacific War was already determined, though neither side knew it yet. The next 5 minutes would see the most concentrated destruction of naval power in history, as 3 fleet carriers transformed from apex predators into funeral pyres.
And McClusky would understand only much later, decades later, how impossibly perfect every element had been, and how easily the entire attack could have failed if any of 1,000 variables had been slightly different. His left hand pushed the stick forward, his SPD Dauntless nosed down toward the ocean 14,000 feet below, and the 5 minutes that would change history began. June 3rd, 1942, 2100 hours. Meanwhile, in his cramped quarters aboard carrier Akagi, Lieutenant Takashi Nakamura's diary entry from the evening before battle, preserved in his family's possession and published in 1984 collection of Japanese naval diaries, documented the confidence and anticipation that characterized Japanese naval aviation on the eve of Midway. The diary entry stated, according to published translation, that Nakamura had attended briefing where Admiral Nagumo explained tomorrow's operation. According to the entry, carrier striking force would attack Midway Island at dawn, eliminating American air power before invasion forces arrived. The entry recorded that briefing emphasized Midway would be easy victory following 6 months of unbroken success across Pacific and Indian Oceans. But the diary entry revealed, according to translation, that some officers expressed quiet concerns about American capabilities. The entry stated, Commander Gender mentioned at briefing that American carriers might be in area, though intelligence suggests they are near Hawaii. Several senior pilots, including Lieutenant Commander Fuchida, stated that if American carriers appear, we must locate and destroy them quickly. The consensus was that we are superior force and will prevail regardless of American response. The diary entry documented Nakamura's own assessment according to translation. The entry stated that he was responsible for supervising torpedo bomber rearming, ensuring aircraft were loaded with proper ordnance for whatever targets appeared. According to the entry, his job required understanding different attack profiles, torpedoes for ships, bombs for land targets, coordination between different weapons for maximum effect. Most significantly, the diary entry stated, according to translation, I inspected all torpedo bombers this evening. Everything is ready. If American ships appear tomorrow, we will destroy them as we destroyed their battleships at Pearl Harbor. We have best pilots, best aircraft, best tactics. Americans have courage but not skill. We will achieve great victory tomorrow. I am confident. The confidence documented in Nakamura's diary was shared across Japanese fleet, according to other diaries and letters preserved in archives. 6 months of unbroken victory had created belief that Japanese naval aviation was invincible. Tomorrow would test that belief. June 4th, 1942, 0430 hours. Takashi Nakamura's post-war testimony given during 1953 interview preserved in Japanese Self-Defense Force archives described the morning when his confidence began transforming into concern. According to the testimony, Nakamura awoke at 0400 hours for launch of first strike against Midway. The testimony stated that flight deck crews had worked through night preparing 108 aircraft, 36 fighters, 36 dive bombers, 36 torpedo bombers for dawn attack. Everything proceeded smoothly, according to the account. Launch began at 0430 hours. Aircraft departed in perfect formation, heading for Midway 240 miles southeast. The testimony described that Nakamura's responsibility was supervising the reserve aircraft, 54 planes kept on Akagi and Kaga, armed with torpedoes, in case American ships appeared. According to the account, these aircraft were positioned on hangar decks ready for rapid launch if needed. Nakamura inspected each aircraft, ensuring torpedoes were properly mounted and armed. But the testimony stated that at 07:02 hours, everything changed. According to the account, Nakamura received order to rearm reserve aircraft from torpedoes to bombs. Strike leader at Midway had radioed requesting second attack because American defenses weren't fully suppressed. Admiral Nagumo ordered reserve aircraft rearmed to support Midway attack since no American ships had been spotted. The testimony described the rearming process according to archives. Nakamura stated, "We brought all reserve aircraft to flight deck. Ordnance crews began removing torpedoes. Process required careful handling because torpedoes are heavy and dangerous. We stacked removed torpedoes on hangar deck, planning to store them in magazines after rearming was complete. We brought bombs up from magazines, preparing to load them on aircraft. Entire process would take 60 to 90 minutes. But at 07:28 hours, according to testimony, new order arrived. Scout plane had spotted American ships, including what appeared to be carrier. Nagumo ordered rearming suspended and aircraft prepared for anti-ship attack, meaning torpedoes instead of bombs. The testimony stated this order created chaos. Some aircraft still had torpedoes, some had bombs, some had neither. We had torpedoes stacked on hangar deck and bombs on flight deck. We had fuel lines running everywhere because we were refueling aircraft for launch. Everything was exposed and disorganized, but we followed orders and began switching weapons again. We thought we had time. We were wrong." June 4th, 1942, 08:20 hours. Ensign George Gay's published memoir from 1979 titled Sole Survivor described Torpedo Squadron 8's attack that would inadvertently create conditions for American dive bomber success. The memoir stated that VT-8 from Carrier Hornet located Japanese fleet at 08:20 hours. According to the account, Squadron Commander John Waldron led 15 TBD Devastators toward Japanese carriers at wave-top altitude, attempting to reach torpedo launch range. The memoir noted that Squadron had no fighter escort. Fighters had gotten separated during search, and torpedo bombers were alone. Gay's memoir described what happened next with visceral detail. According to published account, Japanese Zeros hit us immediately. I was flying in tail-end Charlie position, last aircraft in formation. I watched Zeros shoot down aircraft ahead of me one by one. They came from above and behind, diving through our formation, their guns tearing our planes apart. TBDs were too slow to evade, too poorly armed to fight back effectively. They just fell one after another. The memoir stated that Gay's aircraft was hit repeatedly but kept flying. According to the account, I saw Commander Waldron's plane catch fire. He went down still trying to reach launch position. I counted 11, 12, 13 aircraft shot down ahead of me. My radio man Bob Huntington was hit and killed. My controls were shot up but still working. I was still flying somehow. Gay's memoir described reaching torpedo launch position according to published account. He stated, "I launched my torpedo at perhaps 800 yards from carrier Akagi. I was so low I could see Japanese sailors on deck watching me. I pulled up to avoid hitting carrier's superstructure. That's when my plane got hit by anti-aircraft fire. Engine failed, aircraft crashed into water perhaps 200 yards from Akagi." The memoir documented Gay's survival. According to the account, I got out of cockpit as plane was sinking. I inflated my life jacket. I found my rubber raft floating nearby. I hid under the raft so Japanese wouldn't see me and strafe me. I was only 50 yards from Japanese ships. I could hear their engines and propellers. I stayed under raft watching through small hole as battle continued around me. Gay's unique perspective, floating in middle of battle zone, would provide American intelligence with only eyewitness account of entire battle, according to post-war debriefing reports. June 4th, 1942, 09:40 hours. George Gay's memoir described watching from his raft as final torpedo attack occurred. Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise attacking Japanese carriers at 0940 hours. According to the memoir, Gay watched from his hiding place as another wave of American torpedo bombers approached Japanese fleet at wave-top altitude. The memoir stated, "I could see them coming in low just like we had. I could see Japanese Zeros diving on them just like they'd done to us. I watched them get shot down one after another. It was happening again. Same slaughter, same result." The memoir documented that Gay counted 14 American torpedo bombers attacking. According to the account, he watched 10 get shot down. None appeared to hit targets. The memoir stated, "Japanese defensive fire was so intense that torpedo bombers had no chance, but they kept coming anyway. They kept attacking even though they could see what happened to us. They had to know they were going to die. They attacked anyway." What Gay couldn't see from water level, according to memoir, was what Japanese fighter controllers were seeing from carriers. Post-war Japanese accounts revealed that combat air patrol had been pulled down to wave-top altitude, responding to 3 separate torpedo attacks between 0820 and 0940 hours. All available fighters were committed to slaughtering torpedo bombers. High altitude was left undefended because all Japanese attention focused on destroying low-altitude threat. Gay's memoir stated that around 10:20 hours, he noticed something different. According to the account, "I saw dive bombers high up, maybe 2 or 3 miles high. They were so high I could barely see them. They were in perfect position. The Japanese were all focused on torpedo bombers at sea level. Nobody was watching high altitude. Those dive bombers had clear path to attack." June 4th, 1942, 10:22 hours. Wade McClusky's memoir, published in 1976, titled "The Battle That Changed Everything," described the 5-minute attack with detail that captured both tactical precision and emotional intensity of the moment. The memoir stated that at 10:22 hours, McClusky signaled his squadron to begin attack. According to published account, McClusky's SBD Dauntless rolled inverted and pulled through into vertical dive. The memoir described, "Everything happened fast once dive began. Altimeter unwinding, airspeed building, target getting larger in bomb sight."
I was diving at 70 degrees, nearly vertical, toward carrier Kaga. The memoir documented what McClusky observed during dive. According to the account, I could see carrier's deck clearly. It was crowded with aircraft. I could see equipment scattered everywhere, ordnance, fuel lines, men running. It looked chaotic, not organized like carrier flight deck should look. Something was wrong down there. Something had disrupted their operations. McClusky's memoir described his attack run according to published account. He stated, "I centered carrier in my bomb sight. I was diving through 8,000 feet, then 6,000, then 4,000. Anti-aircraft fire was sporadic and inaccurate. They weren't expecting attack from high altitude. At 2,500 feet, I released my bomb, 1,000-pound bomb falling away.
I pulled out of dive hard, 6 Gs pressing me down into seat. I leveled at 500 feet and looked back." The memoir's description of what McClusky saw became one of most quoted passages in Pacific War literature. According to published account, "My bomb had missed. It hit water perhaps 30 feet from carrier's bow. I felt sick. I'd brought my squadron 300 miles beyond safe return point, and I'd missed. But then I saw other bombs hitting. Lieutenant Dick Best's bomb hit Kaga's deck just forward of island. Bomb penetrated deck and detonated below. Then another bomb hit. Then another. Carrier's entire forward section erupted in flames. Explosion was so violent, it blew aircraft off the deck. I watched aircraft tumble through air-trailing fire." McClusky's memoir stated he looked toward other carriers. According to the account, Akagi was burning, Soryu was burning. All 3 carriers were burning simultaneously. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. We'd hit 3 carriers in matter of minutes. Explosions were still happening, secondary explosions from fuel and ordnance. Each carrier was disappearing in smoke and flames. The memoir documented McClusky's immediate assessment. According to published account, I understood instantly that we'd hit them at perfect moment. Their decks were crowded with aircraft being fueled and armed. Our bombs had detonated among fuel lines and ordnance, creating cascading explosions. If we'd attacked 1 hour earlier or later, carriers might have been in different configuration, but we'd caught them exactly when they were most vulnerable. The timing was impossibly perfect, too perfect to be pure skill.
We've been fortunate beyond imagination. June 4th, 1942, 10:24 hours. Takashi Nakamura's testimony described experiencing American bomb attack from perspective of someone on Akagi's flight deck at moment of impact. According to the testimony, Nakamura was supervising rearming operations when Lookout shouted warning about dive bombers. The testimony stated, "I looked up and saw American aircraft diving almost vertically toward us. They were so high I hadn't seen them until they were already diving. I realized instantly we had no fighters at altitude to intercept them. Everyone on deck realized simultaneously that we were about to be hit and had no defense." The testimony described bombs falling according to archives. Nakamura stated, "I saw bombs falling from several aircraft. They looked small at first, but grew larger rapidly. I remember thinking I should take cover, but there was nowhere to go on open flight deck. I just stood watching bombs fall toward us." The testimony documented that bomb hit Akagi's deck approximately 30 meters from where Nakamura was standing. According to the account, "Explosion threw me across deck. I hit something, aircraft or equipment, and lost consciousness briefly. When I recovered, everything was fire. Bomb had hit among aircraft being fueled. Aviation fuel was burning across entire deck. Men were on fire. Aircraft were exploding."
Secondary explosions were happening constantly as flames reached fuel tanks and ordnance. Nakamura's testimony stated that he attempted to fight fires according to archives. The account described, "I grabbed fire hose, but there was no water pressure. Damage must have severed fire mains. Other crew members were trying to fight fires with portable extinguishers, but flames were too large. Entire forward section of ship was burning intensely. We couldn't get close enough to fight it effectively." The testimony documented that within 5 minutes, situation became hopeless according to archives. Nakamura stated, "Fires had spread to hangar deck, where we had stacked torpedoes during rearming. When fires reached torpedoes, they began exploding. Each explosion started new fires. Entire ship was burning. Officers ordered us to abandon efforts to fight fires and evacuate to stern. We couldn't save Akagi. She was already dead." June 4th, 1942, 10:30 hours. George Gay's memoir described watching American dive bomber attack from unique perspective of floating in ocean 50 yards from Japanese carriers. According to the memoir, Gay was hiding under his raft when he heard aircraft engines at high altitude. The memoir stated, "I peeked out from under raft and saw dive bombers coming down, lots of them. They were diving almost straight down. I'd never seen dive bombing before. It was spectacular and terrifying." The memoir documented Gay's view of bombs hitting carriers. According to published account, "I saw bombs hit cargo first, carrier closest to me. First bomb hit forward deck. Explosion was followed immediately by bigger explosion. Then another. Entire forward part of ship erupted in flames. I could feel heat from explosion even though I was hundreds of yards away in water. I could hear metal tearing and men screaming." Gay's memoir described watching all 3 carriers burn simultaneously. According to the account, "I looked around and saw 3 carriers burning, all 3, black smoke rising thousands of feet, explosions happening constantly. Aircraft on decks were catching fire and exploding. It was most destructive thing I'd ever witnessed."
3 Japanese carriers that had been powerful and dangerous were now burning wrecks. The memoir stated that Gay remained in water watching battle continue according to published account. He described, "I saw 4th carrier, Hiryu, launching aircraft. She was several miles away and hadn't been hit. But 3 carriers were destroyed. I understood what this meant. We'd just changed the balance of naval power in Pacific. Japan had lost 3/4 of their carrier striking force in maybe 5 minutes. They couldn't replace those carriers quickly. We could. The war had just shifted in our favor." Gay's memoir documented that he remained in water until evening when American aircraft spotted him and directed destroyer to rescue. According to the account,
Gay was picked up at 1800 hours, nearly 10 hours after being shot down, and returned to American fleet where his eyewitness account would provide intelligence with detailed understanding of battle's progression. June 4th, 1942. 10:45 hours. Meanwhile, aboard carrier Nagara, where Admiral Nagumo had transferred his flag after Akagi became untenable, Japanese commanders attempted to assess catastrophe that had destroyed 3 carriers in 5 minutes. Nagumo's action report, dated July 15, 1942, preserved in archives and translated post-war, documented his immediate assessment. The report stated, according to translation, "At 10:30 hours, I observed that Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu were all burning intensely." Damage control reports indicated fires were uncontrollable on all 3 ships. Assessment was that all 3 carriers were total losses. Only Hiryu remained operational. The report documented Nagumo's decision according to translation. He stated, "I ordered Hiryu to prepare immediate strike against American carriers. We had lost 3/4 of our carrier strength, but still possessed 1 operational carrier. We could still strike back. We had to strike back. Japanese Navy could not accept such defeat without response." But the report acknowledged strategic reality according to translation. Nagumo stated, "Even if Hiryu's strike succeeded in damaging American carriers, exchange ratio favored enemy overwhelmingly. We lost 3 carriers to their 0 losses. More significantly, these were carriers that had given us 6 months of unbroken victory. Losing them meant end of our offensive capability. Japan could not replace these losses quickly enough to maintain strategic initiative." The report included assessment of what had gone wrong according to translation. Nagumo stated, "American attack hit us at moment of maximum vulnerability. We were caught during rearming operations with aircraft on deck, fuel lines open, and ordnance exposed. Single bomb hits triggered cascading explosions that destroyed ships within minutes. American timing appeared to be a result of perfect intelligence and perfect coordination. We believed they knew exactly when we would be most vulnerable and coordinated their attack accordingly." What Nagumo didn't know, according to post-war analysis, was that American attack timing was largely accidental. Dive bombers from 2 carriers had arrived independently at same moment through navigation errors that coincidentally converged at optimal time. Torpedo squadrons that pulled Japanese fighters out of position weren't coordinating with dive bombers. Everything appeared coordinated from Japanese perspective, but was actually fortune-favoring aggressive American tactics. June 4th, 1942, 17:05 hours.
Wade McClusky's memoir documented that after attacking Japanese carriers at 10:22 hours, his squadron returned to Enterprise with fuel gauges reading empty. According to the account, several aircraft ran out of fuel before reaching carrier and ditched in ocean. McClusky himself landed with fuel gauge reading 0, completely empty, having flown on fumes for final 20 minutes. The memoir stated that McClusky refueled and rearmed for second mission. According to the account, at 16:30 hours, scout aircraft located carrier Hiryu, 4th Japanese carrier that hadn't been hit in morning attack. Enterprise and Yorktown launched 24 dive bombers for evening strike. McClusky's memoir described approaching Hiryu at 1700 hours. According to published account, Hiryu was alone.
No other carriers nearby. The other three were already sinking. Hiryu was launching aircraft preparing to strike our carriers again. We attacked from 19,000 feet. Same tactics as morning. Vertical dive. Release at 2,500 feet. Pull out hard. The memoir documented that bombs hit Hiryu's forward deck, creating similar cascading fires as morning attacks. According to the account, 4 bombs hit between 17:05 and 17:08 hours. Each bomb detonated among aircraft being fueled on deck. Same result as morning. Fires spread instantly. Secondary explosions destroyed ship's structure. Within minutes, Hiryu was burning as intensely as the other 3 carriers. McClusky's memoir stated his assessment of day's outcome. According to published account, flying back to Enterprise, I understood what we'd accomplished. We'd destroyed all 4 Japanese carriers that attacked Pearl Harbor. We'd eliminated Japan's carrier striking force in single day. The balance of naval power in Pacific had shifted decisively. Japan couldn't replace these losses. We could. The war had turned. June 5th, 1942, 0200 hours. Takashi Nakamura's testimony described final hours aboard burning Akagi before ship was abandoned. According to the testimony, Nakamura remained on stern section of ship fighting fires until approximately midnight. The testimony stated, "We tried everything to save Akagi, but fires had spread throughout ship. Every compartment was burning. We lost water pressure when fire mains were destroyed. We couldn't pump water to fight fires. We just watched our ship burn." The testimony documented that at 0200 hours on June 5th, Captain ordered abandon ship. According to the account, Captain Aoki announced that Akagi could not be saved. All personnel were to evacuate. We lined up on stern and jumped into water. Destroyers picked us up. I was rescued by destroyer Arashi at 0345 hours. Nakamura's testimony stated that he watched Akagi sink from Arashi's deck. According to archives, at dawn on June 5th, Akagi was still burning. She was dead in water, listing heavily. At 0500 hours, Japanese destroyers fired torpedoes into Akagi to ensure she sank rather than being captured. I watched torpedoes hit, and Akagi began sinking rapidly. She disappeared beneath water at 0520 hours.
Watching Akagi sink was most painful experience of my life. That ship had been my home. My friends died on that ship, and we lost her because American bombs hit us at exactly the moment when we were most vulnerable. Similar accounts from survivors of Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu documented identical patterns. All 4 carriers were destroyed by bomb hits that triggered cascading fires and explosions. All 4 sank within 24 hours of being hit. All 4 took with them not just ships, but entire air groups, pilots, aircrew, maintenance personnel, representing core of Japanese naval aviation capability. June 1942.
Post-war casualty analysis documented human cost of 5-minute attack that destroyed 3 carriers and evening attack that destroyed 4th. Japanese losses, according to compiled records, included approximately 3,000 personnel killed, including 110 pilots from carrier air groups, plus hundreds of aircrew and maintenance personnel. 4 fleet carriers were total losses: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, representing 1/3 of Japanese carrier force. More devastating than numbers, according to analysis, were the irreplaceable losses. The 4 carriers were most experienced in Japanese fleet. Their crews had fought together since Pearl Harbor. Their pilots had trained together for years. Their air groups represented core of Japanese naval aviation excellence. These losses couldn't be replaced through building new carriers. Building ships took months. Training replacement crews to equivalent standard took years that Japan didn't have. American losses, according to records, included carrier Yorktown sunk by submarine June 7th, destroyer Hammond sunk with Yorktown, approximately 150 aircraft lost, including all torpedo bombers from VT-8 and most from VT-6 and VT-3, and approximately 300 personnel killed, including all 15 pilots from VT-8, except Ensign Gay. The exchange, according to analysis, was devastating for Japan. Trading 4 carriers for 1 plus associated personnel losses meant Japan lost capacity to conduct offensive carrier operations. American losses were significant, but America possessed industrial capacity to replace them. Japan did not. 1982, Pearl Harbor. The 1982 Battle of Midway 40th Anniversary Symposium, held at Pearl Harbor, documented in published proceedings, brought Wade McClusky and Takashi Nakamura together for first time since battle, where McClusky had bombed Nakamura's carrier. According to proceedings, McClusky, age 80, retired rear admiral, met Nakamura, age 68, retired, during memorial ceremony. Their conversation, recorded in proceedings, revealed emotional complexity neither man had fully processed during intervening 40 years. McClusky's statement, according to transcript, began with acknowledging Fortune's role. He stated, "I violated fuel safety margins to keep searching. That decision found you at moment when you were vulnerable. But I didn't know you were vulnerable. I didn't know torpedo attacks had pulled your fighters out of position. I didn't coordinate with other dive bomber squadron that attacked simultaneously. Everything that made attack successful was accidental convergence, not planned coordination." Nakamura's response, recorded in transcript, provided perspective that shocked Americans present. According to proceedings, he stated, "For 40 years we believed your attack was perfectly planned. We believed your intelligence told you exactly when we would be rearming aircraft. We believed your coordination was deliberate. We believed torpedo attacks were coordinated with dive bombers to pull our fighters out of position. Learning today that attack timing was accidental, that you arrived at perfect moment through fortune rather than planning, makes defeat more difficult to accept." The transcript documented McClusky's reaction. According to proceedings, he stated, "I arrived at perfect moment because I violated doctrine about fuel safety. I found you because I gambled everything on hunch that you were close enough to reach. I attacked when I did because I was about to run out of fuel and had no choice. Everything that made attack successful involved decisions that could easily have failed catastrophically if fortune hadn't favored us." Nakamura's response, according to transcript, revealed Japanese perspective on rearming decision that made carriers vulnerable. He stated, "We were caught during rearming because Admiral Nagumo ordered weapons changed twice that morning. First, we loaded torpedoes for attacking ships. Then we switched to bombs for attacking Midway. Then we switched back to torpedoes when your carriers were spotted. This rearming created chaos, aircraft on deck, fuel lines open, ordnance stacked everywhere. Your bombs hit us during this chaos. If you had attacked 1 hour earlier or later, we would have been in different configuration, possibly less vulnerable." The transcript documented discussion of timing that made attack decisive. McClusky stated, according to proceedings, "Your fighters were at sea level chasing our torpedo bombers when my dive bombers arrived at 14,000 feet. If your fighters had been at high altitude, they would have intercepted us. But they were all pulled down to wave level. The torpedo attacks sacrificed themselves but created conditions where dive bombers could attack undefended." Nakamura's response, recorded in proceedings, acknowledged this coordination. He stated, "We thought torpedo attacks and dive attacks were coordinated. Torpedo bombers pulled our fighters down. Minutes later, dive bombers attacked from altitude we'd left undefended. The timing was so perfect we assumed it was planned. Learning it was accidental convergence is both frustrating and remarkable. You won through fortune combined with courage. But fortune favors those who position themselves to exploit it. You positioned yourselves aggressively. Fortune rewarded that aggression." The transcript concluded with both men's assessment of battle's meaning. McClusky stated, according to proceedings, "Midway victory resulted from code-breaking creating opportunity, aggressive tactics positioning forces to exploit opportunity, and fortune making everything converge at perfect moment. Remove any factor and outcome could have been different. We won because intelligence, courage, and timing all favored us simultaneously. Nakamura's final statement recorded in transcript stated, "We lost Midway in 5 minutes when American bombs hit 3 carriers simultaneously during rearming. Those 5 minutes ended Japan's offensive capability. After Midway, we could only defend what we had taken. We couldn't take more. We couldn't replace what we lost. The war was decided in those 5 minutes. Everything after was consequence of decisions made and fortune that favored you during 5 minutes when everything converged perfectly." The Battle of Midway revealed fundamental truths about naval warfare, intelligence, timing, fortune, and the relationship between preparation and luck that remain relevant for understanding military operations. First truth: intelligence creates opportunities but doesn't guarantee success. American code-breaking revealed Japanese plans allowing Nimitz to position carriers for ambush, but intelligence only created possibility. Exploiting opportunity required finding enemy at extreme range with limited fuel, attacking at moment of maximum vulnerability, and achieving decisive results before enemy recovered. Station hypo's intelligence work was necessary, but insufficient for victory. Second truth: accidental coordination can be more effective than deliberate planning. American attack appeared perfectly coordinated from Japanese perspective. Torpedo bombers pulling fighters out of position, followed immediately by dive bombers attacking undefended altitude. But coordination was accidental. Squadrons arrived independently through navigation errors that coincidentally converged at optimal moment. Accidental coordination proved more effective than deliberate coordination could have been because it exploited enemy vulnerabilities that planners didn't know existed. Third truth: vulnerability windows are brief and close quickly. Japanese carriers were maximally vulnerable for approximately 20 minutes during rearming when aircraft crowded decks with fuel lines open and ordnance exposed. McClusky's attack hit during that window. Arriving earlier or later would have found carriers in different configuration, possibly less vulnerable. Brief windows require immediate exploitation. Hesitation means opportunity passes unused. Fourth truth: bold decisions that violate doctrine can succeed when fortune favors them. McClusky's decision to search beyond safe fuel return violated every doctrine about fuel management. Most pilots would have turned back. McClusky's gamble found Japanese carriers at moment when they were vulnerable. His violation of doctrine succeeded because fortune favored aggressive action. But same decision easily could have failed catastrophically, leaving squadrons ditched in ocean, having achieved nothing. Fifth truth: cascading failures magnify damage beyond what seems possible. Single bomb hits hitting carriers in normal configuration might have caused manageable damage, but bombs hitting during rearming when fuel and ordnance were exposed triggered cascading fires and explosions that destroyed ships within minutes. Systems are most vulnerable during transitions between states when normal safety protocols are temporarily suspended for operational expediency. The 5 minutes from 10:22 to 10:27 hours on June 4, 1942, destroyed Japan's offensive carrier capability and shifted naval balance decisively in America's favor. 3 carriers burning simultaneously, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, created conditions where 4th carrier Hiryu fought alone and was destroyed that evening. Japan never recovered carrier parity. By 1944, America possessed 20 fleet carriers to Japan's 6. Wade McClusky's decision to continue searching beyond safe fuel return brought him to Japanese fleet at exact moment when torpedo attacks had pulled defenses out of position and carriers were caught during rearming, creating maximum vulnerability. The convergence appeared to Japanese like perfect American intelligence and coordination. Learning decades later that convergence was accidental made defeat more devastating because it suggested fortune favored America in ways planning couldn't control. But fortune favored America because American forces positioned themselves aggressively to exploit fortune when it appeared. McClusky searched beyond safe limits. Torpedo squadrons attacked despite obsolete aircraft and certain casualties. Dive bomber pilots pressed attacks despite fuel shortages. Aggressive action created conditions where fortune's favor could be decisive. Takashi Nakamura survived Akagi's destruction and spent 40 years believing Americans had perfect intelligence, telling them exactly when Japanese carriers would be most vulnerable. Learning at 1982 reunion that attack timing was largely accidental transformed his understanding. Americans hadn't won through superior intelligence alone. They'd won through combination of adequate intelligence, aggressive tactics, and fortune that made everything converge at perfect moment. George Gay, sole survivor of VT-8, floating in ocean watching battle, provided perspective neither side possessed during battle. From water level, he watched torpedo bombers get slaughtered, achieving no hits. From same position, he watched dive bombers attack undefended altitude and destroy 3 carriers in minutes. He understood that torpedo squadron's sacrifice created conditions for dive bombers' success, even though no coordination existed. He witnessed fortune favoring aggressive American tactics in ways that appeared miraculous, but resulted from dozens of independent decisions converging accidentally at optimal moment. The Midway miracle was that everything converged perfectly. Intelligence creating opportunity, torpedo attacks pulling Japanese fighters out of position, dive bombers arriving at exact moment when carriers were vulnerable during rearming, bombs hitting exposed fuel and ordnance triggering cascading destruction, and fortune favoring every American decision while punishing every Japanese choice. Remove any single factor and outcome could have been different, but miracles must be earned. Midway's miracle was earned through months of code-breaking work at Station Hypo that revealed Japanese plans, earned through aggressive tactical decisions that positioned American forces to exploit intelligence, earned through torpedo squadron sacrifices that pulled Japanese defenses out of position, earned through dive bomber pilots attacking despite fuel shortages and fatigue, earned through dozens of individual decisions that collectively created conditions where fortune's favor could be decisive. 40 years after battle, Wade McClusky and Takashi Nakamura could meet as friends and discuss 5 minutes that changed their lives and determined Pacific War's outcome. McClusky acknowledged fortune's role alongside courage and intelligence. Nakamura acknowledged that Japanese defeat stemmed from being caught during vulnerable moment that American attack exploited through combination of planning and chance. Both men understood that 5 minutes had proven that naval warfare in industrial age would be decided by intelligence creating opportunities, courage exploiting opportunities, timing being perfect, and fortune favoring bold action. The side that could combine all factors would win decisively. The side that lacked any factor would lose catastrophically. The 5 minutes that sunk Japan's empire taught a lesson that remains relevant. Fortune favors those who position themselves through intelligence, courage, and aggressive action to exploit fortune when it appears. Midway's miracle wasn't luck alone. It was earned through preparation combined with willingness to take risks that could easily have failed, but succeeded because fortune favored bold action executed at perfect moment when everything converged exactly right.